welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Karimi Gavanlu and I will be chairing the planning meeting today. On the top table are Glenn Beaumont. We also have Ellie Yarham and Tom Piggott as planning officers who will come and present. We have Ben Burgess, myself, Enna Lamming and Lucy Palmer. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but as the alarm does sound, the fire exits are clearly signed in green. This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record this meeting, please identify yourselves now. Thank you. Please can you all ensure your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks if needed at various times throughout the meeting. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is parish town council first, followed by objectors and finally supporters. For example, the applicant or the agent. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents, photographs, etc. at the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? Yes.
Am I allowed to...
Right, open the meeting. Declarations of interest, please, Lucy. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I will be speaking on the Horsted and the Coltershall applications 4C and 4D, and I will remove myself from the room during the discussion. And I just want to make the point that ACLE is in the watershed of the Broads Internal Drainage Board, and I am a board member. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else in the committee? Nigel.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Tipple and Councillor Johnson, and we have Councillor Brennan as his substitute.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to refer you to the minutes of the meetings held on the 3rd of December. Is there any comments from those minutes from the committee? No? Thank you. Okay, we go straight to applications. The first one is Havingland, land at Havingland Hall Park in Norfolk, and we have Glenn presenting for that one.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So the first application is before you at the request of Councillor Bullman for the reasons set out in section 4 of the report. Doubtless you've seen the update sheet as well, where I refer to another potential condition that pending the outcome of those further discussions with regard to nutrient neutrality and GIRAMs, which, thanks to the festive period, haven't progressed particularly quickly over the last couple of weeks. So the recommendation remains as published. Key considerations are set out in 5.1 of the report, and of particular note in this case is the planning history to the site, which is a material consideration that you obviously need to be aware of. In addition to that, other key matters for you to consider are the principle of development and the location of the site. I'm usually reluctant to give you a blow-by-blow account of the report, but given the history to this site, it's probably useful to maybe reiterate some of the points that have been raised in the report. To begin with, we'll provide some geographical context to the site so you know where it is and what's around it. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with it, but for the sake of the wider audience, we'll do that anyway. So the site is just, find the cursor, just left of centre here, underneath where it says Harringland Hall Country Park, very helpfully. It's to the north of Norwich, between Failthorpe and Corston. Corston's about 2 miles away to the north, and you can just see the annotation at the top of the screen on that, and Failthorpe about 3 miles to the south, which I didn't annotate it, but is pretty much where the cursor is, the road that way. Access to the site has the orange arrow attached to it, and it's about half a mile, going half a mile from this point to where the caravans are within the application site. Holt Road is to the east, which eventually takes you down to Horsford to the south, and then to the north of the screen, those of you that were at the last meeting where the solar farm was considered, and might remember the roundabout immediately outside that site, eventually takes you to that Aylsham Road, Holt Road roundabout. One other feature to point out is the Grade 2 listed Church of St Peter, about 300 metres to the south of the site, the application site being here. So in close up, site comprises 4 elements: Woodlands Park, Charnbeck Park, and then Lakeside, which sort of skirts round to the southeast. Woodlands Park has planning permission for 10 units, Charnbeck 20 and Lakeside 19, all of which are not subject to any planning conditions restricting their occupancy. I've also included an inset of the coach house in the top right hand corner there, which is just to the north of the caravans. It's a Grade 2 listed buildings, and as the report sets out, we don't consider the impact on the setting of that coach house is going to be significant, so I'm not going to dwell on that any further. Moving into some of the planning history to the site. Application granted in 2016 for 19 caravans at what is known as Lakeside. And again, to reiterate, there's no restriction on their occupancy. To the northwest, this is Charnbeck, and although not shown on this drawing at the time, 10 in Woodlands just there. This is the planning permission that was granted in 2018 for the holiday accommodation within most of the current application site. We'll see shortly the only difference is this corner here. And that was granted planning permission for a holiday caravan park and associated infrastructure, and that was subject to a legal agreement that allowed a number of units to be retained as residential units, but then when they were occupied, when they were vacated by the people specified in the Section 106 agreement, they would revert back to holiday accommodation. So there's no cap on the number of units that were permitted by this planning permission, but there was an approved drawing that showed 84 units being provided. And this is currently the operative planning permission that applies to the site. And one of the approved drawings for that application was this one. And if you have the inclination, and we're not going to do it today, to count all those units, I'm very much hoping it adds up to 84. And then in 2023, the council served an enforcement notice that applies to the area set out in red here. And the basis of that was that the holiday occupancy condition from 2018 was not being complied with. And the caravans, other than those previously identified for residential, were not being occupied as people's sole or main residence. That notice was appealed by 13 individuals, and following an appeal hearing in April 2024, the appeal was allowed and the enforcement notice was quashed. Now, importantly, the inspector chose not to reword or correct the notice and explained their rationale for doing so, which I've set out in section 5.10 of this report. Ultimately, it leaves the council in a quite difficult position of being, it's very difficult for us to enforce that planning permission in light of the inspector's decision. So this current application seeks to regularise the situation on the basis of this drawing and cap the number of units at 60, 45 of which would be residential, 15 would be a sort of flexible holiday stroke residential use as well. Now the application follows discussions with the applicants following that appeal decision, and this drawing probably also provides a useful jumping off point to consider the principle of development as well, which is another one of the key considerations. So policy GC2 of the Development Management DPD, the DMDPD, which you'll all be familiar with, permits new development in the countryside where it complies with another allocation or policy of the local plan and doesn't result in any significant adverse impacts. One of the policies that is permissive of development in the countryside is the council's tourism policy for tourist accommodation. That's policy E3. And that permits holiday accommodation subject to compliance with certain criteria. To some extent, the horse has already bolted because the council has previously granted holiday accommodation at this site, so it would be difficult for it not to do so again up to a certain level. And in terms of the residential units, as I've already said, the planning history of the site is a weighty consideration for you to wrestle with today. Policy 5 of the GNLP also needs to be borne in mind, and I consider that in my report. That is permissive of residential caravans inside and outside of settlement limits, subject to compliance with other development plan policies, and those sites being within reasonable travelling distance to a range of services and amenities. Added to both of these points is that the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and that's something you've wrestled with before as well, and that applies to residential caravan sites as well. They're not exempt from that broader picture. As with the Buxton application that you're going to be considering later on this morning, paragraph 11D of the MPPF applies, and what that sets out is that, or what it guides decision makers to do, is to grant planning permission unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So I'm sounding a bit croaky, I'm just getting over a cold, so I hope I'm coming across okay. So if we look at some of the photos to give an indication of what's around the site, these are taken at sort of random points. So this is on the road. If we just go back, that's kind of on the southern edge of the site, and then I sort of go up here, and then I do a leap around, following no particular pattern. We just took pictures of different units so you can see what's around. There's about 5 to go through. Units vary in size, age and appearance, but to my eye appear to be sort of reasonably typical of what one might expect to see in this setting. And given the history of the site, what's been permitted, sort of in broad terms, the impacts are going to be neutral. No net change on the character of the area, heritage assets, ecology and highway safety, drainage and flood risk, which have been sorted out as described in the report. So we turn to the final slide. Sets out the key issues: planning history of the site, principle of development, connectivity to local services. They're probably the 3 main ones for you to consider, and the council not having a 5-year land supply. I've not really spoken about the location of the site and connectivity to local services in this presentation, but I'm about to do that. So I'm mindful of the location of the site, and in my view, a range of services and amenities are not really within reasonable travelling distance of the site. I don't think I could pretend otherwise. And there is a Sanders bus service that operates from outside the main entrance to the site about 3 times a week, but that doesn't strike me as being sufficiently regular for people to not rely on their own vehicles. And that weighs against the application. But the circumstances and the unique circumstances of the site and the planning history and the enforcement appeal lead me to ascribe not perhaps as much weight as I normally would to that particular issue. There are several dozen other residential units at the site with no restrictions to their occupancy, and as I've already mentioned and in the report, the appeal inspector quashed the enforcement notice and decided not to reword it to allow the council to enforce something else. And we're left with a planning application that is very difficult for us to enforce. Taking account of those unique circumstances around the application, the absence of a 5-year housing land supply, the absence of significant and demonstrable harms to outweigh the benefits, I consider the application represents an acceptable form of development and subject to matters around nutrient neutrality and GIRAMs being resolved. Application is recommended for approval, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anything the committee wishes to clarify? Jo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Glenn, thank you for your presentation. When you were talking about the various areas of the site, the lakeside, Charnbrook and Woodlands, I understood that there were 19 residential units at Lakeside, 10 at Woodlands, but I didn't catch how many were already residential at Charnbrook. I guess you said 6, because I understand there is 45 units in total that are residential on the site. Is that correct, please?
There are 20 at Charnbeck, 20 at
20.
Charnbeck, 10 at Woodlands, 19 at Lakeside.
And is that the total of the residential units that are there?
That is surrounding this application site. As part of the current application, a survey that the applicant did revealed that 45 are in residential use.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I also ask about the borehole, which is mentioned on page 25 and 26? The Environment Agency had made comments about water extraction.
Yeah.
And I just wondered how this application will impact on the availability of groundwater if this application is approved, please. Thank you.
Yeah, the Environment Agency's comments on water resources are reported at section 4.11 of the report. The applicant had to do some further work around that and some sort of extra metering and identifying somebody who was perhaps tapped into that water supply who maybe shouldn't have been tapped into that water supply. As you'll see from what the Environment Agency has said, they're satisfied with the water resources situation and withdrew its objection.
Can I ask, is there...
No, I don't, but nevertheless, they are subject to a separate regulatory regime that the Environment Agency will enforce and not us.
Have Eleanor and then Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to Councillor Copplestone's question, then I calculate that the total number of units, if this application is approved, would be 109 on the whole site. Is that correct? So bearing in mind the pressure that we know this site has in terms of water supply and sewerage facilities and the sustainability of the site in terms of it's quite away from local facilities, is it possible that should this application be approved, we could place a cap on the location so that no more units could be added?
Well, the application, one of the conditions seeks to cap the number of units at this particular element of the site to 60. The other sites have a cap already on them within the description of development.
Okay.
So that's already dealt with, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Glenn. Looking at where we are, I mean, I can see where where this application is headed. It effectively regularises the activities on the existing site. But something just struck me as a bit strange, that 15 units, 15 vacant units, I think you used the term, and I noted it down, that, you know, they would be for flexible use. Well, I don't often hear that term in planning terms. Flexible use isn't normally something which we use. I'm a bit concerned, you know, if we're regularising it, why are we not regularising it in its entirety? Because the vacant units, are they, again, for clarity, are they subject to planning consent? What planning consent do they currently have? Is the planning consent current? And on what basis was that granted? Because I just think if we're regularising it, to me, it's got to be regularised properly. It's got to be regularised so that everybody knows in this room, yourselves, the officers know, members know, local residents know exactly the status of this site. Because I can see the merit in regularising it. I can see the merit in why the applicant is trying to regularise it. It makes sense. But what I don't quite understand is I don't think this actually does regularise the whole site. And I think Councillor Copplestone alluded to the effect of the potential of expansion in other parts of the site. I think we just need a little more information if possible, please.
Okay. If I miss anything out, you'll have to nod at me or raise your eyebrows. So I'll try and deal with it as best as I can. So first things first, the application seeks to regularise an existing situation that you've suggested, that you've outlined, beg your pardon, and there is to be a cap on the number of units to 60, and that will be a planning condition. The flexible use is probably a careless use of words by me. It's more the occupancy rather than the use. The use would be for holiday accommodation or residential accommodation. And if you look at the schedule of conditions on the on the list of conditions, there will be a requirement for the site operator to maintain a register of plot owners and provide a plan of those plots that, on request from the council, as to which ones will be residential and which ones will be for holiday accommodation. And the council could request that register at any reasonable time. I suspect I've probably missed a few things, so please do come back.
Yeah, realistically, I get that, but I think you've said they're holiday or residential. It's going to be difficult to enforce, let's be honest. I mean, we're not going to have inspectors going out there checking cars in, checking cars out. To me, regularising should mean exactly what it says, regularising. It should be residential or holiday. And I think, I'm not making a big issue of this, but I just think, I think you enforced your own comment. You said we don't normally use flexibility, but then effectively said, well, we do allow, this is going to allow flexibility in terms of holiday or residential. I don't have a problem with either, but what it doesn't do is regularise it.
I think the conditions allow us to do that. That third condition with the register being kept and the plots, the plot map, that would allow our enforcement team to go out and register it, enforce it. I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Then I may have missed it, but can I just understand, under the water resource thing, which has already been raised, it says, in order for us to find the proposal acceptable, calculations must demonstrate this can be accommodated within a maximum volume allowed in the current abstraction licence. Now, I'm not sure whether you did answer that, but can I ask, has that been clarified, and do we know exactly that the calculations taken does mean the maximum volume can be allowed in the current licence? Thank you.
So the water resources matter has been addressed with following discussions with Anglian Water. I don't have the figures to hand as to what measurements were taken. I may well have them, but I can't remember. But I think the agent is sort of signalling behind me that she does, so she might be able to, or behind you that does, and she may be able to address that as part of the questioning. So if I can sort of schlep that off to her, I'm sure she can respond better than me.
Okay, so no further questions. I'll go to speakers. Do we have an Andre Corollis here? Have you slipped in without us knowing? You have. Would you like to come to the front, please? Mr. Corollis, you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking. Just press the right-hand button.
Right, good morning everyone. First of all, thank you for allowing me to talk to this application. So, my name is Andre Corollis. I'm the chair of Havering Parish Meeting. Havering Parish Meeting objects to the current application and requests that it is refused and replaced with a revised application. The parish considers the permanent designation of 45 existing holiday lodges plus 15 additional plots as residential to be unnecessary, unjustified and harmful. So, the key reasons for refusal. 1. Unnecessary expansion of a residential use. So the previous planning decision related to lodges, not the plots. This is key. So the planning inspector gave the definition of a caravan as something that could be towed away on the back of a jeep. So that's the key thing here. So it's I'll reiterate that again. Previous appeal decision related to the lodges, not the plots. Granting planning permission, permanent residential status rather, to both would almost double the number of residential units, accelerating the drift towards a wholly residential park. Now that would establish a critical mass, 60 out of 75 units, leading to full residential conversion. Secondly, unsustainable location. So the site is not part of a village cluster and is not designated for residential development. There's poor access to services, inadequate public transport and no nearby amenities. Thirdly, inadequate infrastructure and services. Long-standing concerns exist regarding water supply, sewage disposal, road access and road conditions. The parish estimates suggest that water demand and foul water discharge would significantly exceed the permitted and assumed capacities, raising contamination risks. Fourthly, no local housing need. There is no demonstrated demand for additional residential lodges. Moreover, existing residential parks nearby have properties cheaper, larger and they're better serviced. Fifth, loss of holiday use. Reducing the number of holiday units would harm the local economy and community life. The holiday park has long provided affordable countryside holidays for family and visitors who contribute positively to village life. Sixthly, concerns over community claims. Claims of strong integration of park residents into village community and church life is not supported by any evidence, and on-site facilities are extremely limited. And finally, residential protection and standards. So some lodges used as residents may not meet the British standards for mobile homes, and there are concerns about the security of tenure, with new contracts potentially weakening residential's legal protection. And assurances from the site owners about non-eviction are unclear. They are potentially time limited and unenforceable. So what is the parish's preferred response, or approach rather? It is to submit a new planning application, grant temporary residential permission to only 45 of the lodges currently occupied as residences, and on sale or vacation, those lodges and plots should revert back to holiday use. Produce a detailed, approved site plan, clearly identifying residential versus holiday plots, boundaries, plot sizes and spacing. Align planning permission, site licensing and the Mobile Homes Act 1983 to improve clarity and residential protection. Maintain an up-to-date register of residential occupation, and that should be inspected quarterly. Clarify licensing approval, particularly regarding the empty pads, spacing and future lodge sizes, and address the overlap area on Lakeside properly, and that's increasing the Lakeside residential units from 19 to 21 with correct documentation. The current application is approved. The parish requests strict conditions. One, fixed identification of the 45 residential units, in other words, no flexible cap. Two, retain the 15 vacant plots as holiday only. Thirdly, regular monitoring and enforcement, minimum every 3 months. Fifth, licensing and infrastructure improvements. Sixth, measures to prevent mis-selling of holiday units as de facto residences. 7, improve compliance with British standards and security of tenure. And finally, amendment of the site licence to reflect the mixed status. So I just want to conclude. So the parish's core concern is that the application risks enabling the site operators to revoke the existing licences on 45 plots, remove the current holiday lodges, reallocate those plots along with additional 15 plots as permanent residences, effectively forcing existing holiday lodge owners off the site. Now that goes beyond the planning inspector's decision.
You've had 5 minutes, I'm afraid. You've had your 5 minutes, I'm afraid.
Right, okay, thank you.
Does the committee wish, just remain seated for a minute. Do you wish any clarification from the speaker? Jo.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. It's really interesting to hear the comments of, oh sorry, can you turn it off? Yeah. That's lovely, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corrales. It was really interesting to hear what the parish council view was. You mentioned that there was limited facilities, sort of community facilities on site. I'd like to know more about that, please. And also you said that the infrastructure was limited. Could you expand on that, please? Thank you.
So firstly, there is a tiny shop there. which I think just caters for milk, butter, that sort of stuff. Haveringland is a spread out parish. We don't have a shop. We don't have a village hall. It is literally, I think we saw from the map, almost in the middle of nowhere. In terms of infrastructure, there's one main road in. This is a previous concern as well. One main road in, and that's off the Haveringland Road. If there's a fire, some kind of disaster, there's only that one road out. It's a narrowish road, probably the width of this platform to the end. So if any fire engines, ambulances, anything like that had to go in there for a major incident, then potentially there could be issues. There have been historically sewage issues. There has been evidence, and I've seen pictures of water spills off onto the road. The drainage there is very poor. The water table where we are is extremely high. So there are a lot of ongoing issues as well.
Thank you. Nobody else will go to the next speaker, please. Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat, please.
Thank you.
Do we have Rebecca Julian, please? Ms. Julian, again, you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Sorry, I don't hear very well.
You have 5 minutes from when you start
Thank
speaking,
you.
and your microphone is on, so you don't need to put it on.
Thank you. Right. Just to clarify, I am a holiday home owner stroke now resident. I went to the High Court recently to try and get myself established as a resident in the Lakeside area. That's who I am. That's all about that. As I understand the current application, it is to change the status of 45 holiday homes that currently have residents living in them for 12 months of the year from temporary use to that of residential use. If this is to work satisfactorily, these reclassified units will need the site to have protected site status with the correct planning permission granted and the site licence amended. A protected site is one that has a site licence and planning permission which is not granted for holiday use only or does not prohibit the stationing of mobile home stroke caravans for human habitation at certain times of the year. A residential mobile home owner who lives on a protected site has the protection of the Mobile Home Act 1983. The Act implies certain terms into the agreement and requires the site owner to apply to the court if they want to end the agreement. Mobile home owners on protected sites also have the protection of the Caravan Sites Act. This prohibits harassment and illegal eviction. While it is not unusual to have a mixed residential and holiday use sites, there are two scenarios available. The planning permission and licence restricts residential occupation to a part of the site which the mobile home must be stationed in as part of the protected site. Where the licence and planning permission does not specify which parts of the site are to be used for residential occupation, any mobile home stationed on that site with an agreement for year-round residents is on a protected site. The site owner would be in breach of their licence if the number of year-round resident agreements granted exceeds the amount allowed under the term of the site licence. If the intention is to give this 45 units residential status with the protection of the Mobile Home Act on a protected site, I have no objection at all. However, if the intention is to treat these units as holiday units with 12-month occupation, I strongly object because it leaves these 45 units open to eviction under the law of contract with the site owner. This next part would be slightly, perhaps not the truth, but we've heard it, so I'll please take it just as that. There is a suggestion that the new site owners may offer residential status to some or all of the 45 units for an amount of money. I've heard around about 40,000. Please bear in mind that that's only what I have heard and not what may be the truth. And if they can't pay, the licence will be revoked and these 45 people may be homeless. It should be known that on a lot of sites that are owned by the company applying, van owners have been given at most 6 weeks' notice to remove their van from site, losing money if they were a holiday lodge owner or an owner was sold to live in and they would be left without a home. Broadland District Council have known about people living as residents on this site for well over a decade and a half, taken council tax and could have taken action against various companies misusing their site licence in this regard, choosing not to, enabling many further purchasers to fall into the trap they find themselves in now. I cannot know the site owner's intentions, of course, once planning is granted, and as specific plots for residency on the current plans haven't been identified. This could include people who use their lodges for holiday purposes and put them up for eviction. But if it is, and if it's making these people homeless, again, I have a strong objection to this application being granted. Most owners on this site have been on their plot for over 10 years.
Thank you. Any clarification needed from the speaker? No? You may return to your seat. Thank you. Can I call Vanessa Clipstone, the agent, and Mark Lewis, please? You have 5 minutes each. Do you want to start, Vanessa?
I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Vanessa Clipstone. I'm from Leicester Planning and we're the agents on behalf of the applicant. Havringland Hall is part of the wider Havringland Hall estate, a well-maintained and established parkland comprising a series of parks occupied for holiday and residential purposes. The application site already has permission approved in 2018, which includes occupation of holiday homes for 12 months purposes and residential use of lodges on a permanent basis. As explained by the officer today and in their report, this is the operative planning permission for the site. It was agreed in discussions with planning compliance officers in February 2024 that the existing 2018 permission was unwieldy and not easy to manage for park operators or to effectively enforce for the council. It was agreed that a new application be submitted to replace the 2018 permission, to draw a line under the past difficulties and allow for easier control and management of the site. To control the use, a cap on the maximum number of residential units will be set. We have agreed with officers that a suitably worded condition can be used which sets a cap, and that a register and a plan of the site on a unit-by-unit basis is maintained and regularly shared with the council's licensing department and indeed the enforcement department to control the mix of holiday and residential units. In terms of the principle of the development, it must be considered against the development plan policy as well as having regard to the existing permissions and existing use of the site. Policy 3 of the Greater Norwich Local Plan permits tourist accommodation outside settlement limits, whilst Policy 5 provides general support for the provision of residential caravans and that Winfield sites can be within and outside of settlement boundaries. Policy GC2 supports development outside the settlement limits where it does not result in any significant adverse impacts. Having regard to these policies, the general principle of development is deemed acceptable, subject to compliance with other policy considerations. In line with the details set out in the officer's report, I would like to draw to your attention the following technical and policy considerations. The development will contribute in part to the lack of 5-year housing land supply, and there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out in the National Planning Policy. Residential park homes provide a low-cost and more affordable type of housing and an ideal opportunity to downsize. There will be a neutral impact on the character and appearance of the area, and the proposals will preserve the surrounding landscape character. The development is located such that it minimises the risk of flooding on site and off site and complies with policy. Foul water drainage is managed through a packaged treatment plant, and where necessary, any requirements to amend the existing permits will be coordinated through the Environment Agency following the planning decision. The application is not considered to change the setting of the Grade 2 listed coach house or the Grade 2 star Church of St Peter's, and therefore complies with policy. There are no on-site ecology considerations or concerns, and no requirement for BNG for this development, given its retrospective nature. There is no objection from Highways Authority on the grounds of highway safety. Following recent discussions with the local bus operator, a new bus stop for Haveringland Hall has been included on the existing bus route, and I just want to clarify that this is on a daily basis and operates 3 times a day. Accordingly, any harm arising from the development does not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and having regard to the retrospective nature of the application, the planning history and the existing mixed use of the site, the development is acceptable, and we support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Lewis. We are the operator. We took over the operation in October 23. At that time, some of the comments made about water extract, absolutely correct. It was in excess of what was allowed. We've spent a lot of money and time bringing the water extract back in line with the extraction levels that were permitted, and we are extracting considerably less than the licence allows us to. So part of the planning application, we work with the EA to make sure, do all the tests, do all the numbers to make sure that that conformed with what we were legally allowed to do. We've made sure that all of the sewerage, and we've done a complete, and you can imagine it's a 20-acre site, drainage survey to make sure that all the water is flowing in the right places, whether it be rainwater or sewerage. We've upgraded the facilities on the dam at the end of the lake. If anyone's aware of the large lake down the far end that was seeping water heavily, we've sorted that out at considerable cost. We put fibre into all the lodges the end of last year, bringing that up to spec, making sure that people who do live there do have access to the internet. Spent considerable sums of money putting a new road surface in on one of the areas at the Arboretum. So again, improving the quality of facilities on the site. Our intent is to regularise the situation we inherited. Without it, and working with the planning officers and the licensing officers, without their support, we cannot do any more than we're doing. And without regularising the situation that we're facing, there is little more we can do in enforcing the situation that we inherited with the holiday stroke residential. It's our aim to continue to invest in the park. Since we took it on, we've increased the number of staff from 4 to 6. We've increased the equipment on site. We've invested heavily in tree management. Again, if anyone's been there, you'll be aware of how large the forest is, circa 150 acres. So we work and have worked closely with the Forestry Commission, putting schemes in place to manage the woodland. So it is a management that we've taken seriously, we've invested heavily, and we're looking for support to regularise it and help us manage the site going forward. We're not looking to increase the number of what is already in place. I think that's really important. We're not asking you for another X number of units. We're only looking to regularise what we already have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could you switch that off, please?
Right, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Any members of the committee? Yes. Oh, right, okay. Peter first, then Joe.
Good morning, Mr. Lewis. Thank you. I've heard some concerns raised, and could you give assurances regarding any potential causes for evictions? And also, have you worked in conjunction with the local parish meeting to keep their concerns at bay, please?
With regards to the local parish, if I could bring in a colleague of mine, and he was Ilka who actually works on the site on a day-to-day basis. He can answer the interaction we've had with the parish council, if that's...
Yes, you may do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so as I'm Milka, I'm the operating manager for Harrington Hall. With regards to the parish council, we've not had any traction with as far as we've not been invited to anything. Just what's been available online we've seen.
Evictions, absolutely no intent of evicting anybody. Obviously, if people breach the licence rules or park rules, then evictions will take place. You know, if somebody, we have had circumstances where we have evicted people for certain circumstances. I won't go into specifics. We had a drunk driver driving around the park, we evicted them. I think that's the right thing to do for the protection of the rest of the residents. If people are not paying ground rent, and obviously the ground rent is what enables us to employ the people and keep the grounds up to date, then again, we have no alternative. It is a last resort and nothing that we intend to do.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Ben to come in.
Yes, yeah, just wanted to come in a point of clarification, if that's okay.
Can you switch yours off, please?
I take the point raised about evictions, but I think you have to separate that from the planning matter that we have in front of us today. That's not a planning matter. So yeah, I take the point and thank you for answering, but let's not include that as part of the planning deliberations.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation, and Ms Clipstone as well. Thank you for that. It was really interesting. I'm just slightly worried that some of these static homes are now residential homes. I am concerned about the energy performance of these homes because they historically have not been well insulated and they usually are heated by LPG. Can you tell me what the EPC is on these homes? I'm also slightly worried that there is no community hub or community hall for the residents and holiday guests at your park. I just wonder what the intention is for that. And also you said that there's a regular bus stop. I understand that the holiday park is about half a mile from the highway. Does the bus stop on the highway and do residents have to walk the half a mile to the bus and half a mile back? Because obviously that isn't wholly satisfactory because a lot of the residents on your site I know are probably more elderly people. Thank you.
EPC on units will vary depending on the units. What I can confirm is there are only 2 caravans currently on the whole site. So they are now lodges which have a higher specification than a traditional holiday caravan. But obviously every unit is going to be different and it would depend on its age, condition and location, depending on how it meets the weather, to how it's deteriorated or not. So I can't give you specific on the EPC. You're correct, the bus stop is at the entrance to the park. Depending on what part of the park you're on, yes, there is a walk. If you're on the first park, as you come through the gate on the left-hand side, then it's a very short walk. If you're right down the far end of Lakeside, then yes, you're right, it is a half. It depends on where you're located. We are, having worked with the bus operator, they are putting actually a bus stop itself, physical bus stop, so people can see where it is and does stop on a regular basis.
May I just ask, any community facilities for the residents?
We've put in a new office and that does act as it is not a community centre and it is not a hall, but it does act as a hub for postal, parcels, whatever is needed, and is manned Monday to Friday, 9 till 5.
May I just ask a subsequent question, which yes, if it's relevant. Thank you, Mark. That really explains a lot. You didn't really give me an answer about the energy performance of these lodges? Obviously they vary, but what is the best energy performance on the best lodge that you've got? Because I'm very cognizant of the fact the Right to Rent Act is coming through as legislation, and by 2030 homes that are rented out will need to be a C or above. Thank you, Chair.
We don't own the units that are rented out. Therefore, it is down to the individual who owns that unit. It is not a hire fleet that we have. There are a lot of holiday parks that do own 50, 60, 100 units and rent them out. We don't. So the holiday rental units are owned by third parties.
Thank you. Excuse me, very interesting presentation. And I think the principle of regularisation is a good thing. Just one little query. The 15 vacant plots, when we heard from the planning officer, he said flexibility on those 15 plots. What is the current, it's not that relevant, but just for background, what is the current planning status of those 15 units? Does it have a planning status? Is it for holiday accommodation? Is it for residential units, etc., etc.? As I say, it's not crucial, but just interesting, please.
It's in line with the 2018 permission, which is for holiday with some residential units. So I can't go on a unit by unit basis. I think it's important to clarify, however, that those 15 bases are currently vacant. There aren't plots on there at all. So the intention through this is to enable those units to be used for the mixed use that we're applying for. So hence why there's that flexibility to be used for either residential or for holiday purposes. I appreciate that may not answer fully your question, but it all orientates back to that 2018 permission. So putting the cap in place and putting the control through the plan and through the condition enables us to ensure that that management can be consistent and coordinated on a day-to-day basis. And indeed, it will have access to both the enforcement officers and licensing officers. They will be able to see that at any time that they ask.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So is that planning consent for those 15 units current, or is it extant?
It's current, and it's part of the current 2018 permission. So we're not proposing any increase in units or anything like that. We're just proposing to regularise this so that we can ensure that there's a correct measure in place to be able to control the mix of uses in terms of holiday and residential going forward.
Thank you.
Just a quick one. I'm a little bit confused as to why you want them to be mixed use. Would it not be easier to make the whole site residential? Can you just explain why that's important to you?
I think we don't have an existing permission that is all residential anyway. So we have an existing permission that is for mixed use purposes. So from that point of view, it's already being used for mixed. So that is why we don't want to revert to the residential entirely. Also, there is, there are some benefits to having that mix of holiday and for residential purposes. So it gives that sort of ability to generate income through the holiday uses and indeed maintain jobs on site. So having a mix of uses for holiday and residential is actually an acceptable solution for the operators and enables them to operate both types of uses in an occupation.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to return to your seats, please? Thank you. Councillor Bullman, would you like to come to the front, please? Don't have to. I think you know the procedure, Councillor Bullman. You have 5 minutes.
It's interesting, I've actually been a councillor here since 2019. I think it's fair to say that in the last 6.5 years, this site has been a problem, always a problem, from all the facilities not working at some time or other to problems with residential status versus holiday homes,
frankly, if I was a military officer, I'm not, but if I were, I would regard this as mission creep. Because essentially what has happened over the time is that these holiday lets, which were obviously designed entirely for that, have over time become residential. And we are now faced with a situation where we have to regularise a situation which has been made for us by the Planning Inspectorate. I say regularise because I'm not quite sure that this is actually regularising. To me, it seems more like there is a reiteration of what there was before. Mission creep towards residential, because residential actually gives much more cost effectiveness in terms of your investment. I've heard a lot about how people will be not thrown out of their properties and how we've had all sorts of assurances about what may or may not happen. I have to approach this with a degree of scepticism, I say. I'm also not absolutely confident that were permission granted, that all the conditions that are going to be put in place will actually be monitored to the extent they need to be in order to ensure that there is compliance. I have to say, and I'm going to say it, I have had several examples in my patch of where compliance has not been forthcoming, and the ability to react to that and do something about it is not as swift and as efficient. Suboptimal is the way I would describe it. So I have to say to you, I'm not at all comfortable with this application in any shape or form. Things like, for example, the water supply. Interestingly, I understand the water supply is off this morning. So that gives you some indication of the reliability that you can place on this applicant. We're told that there is a bus service. Well, yes, there is a bus service, 9:45 in the morning, returning at 5, and you've got to walk all the way down the entrance to get to it. So it's stretching it a bit to say there's actually an efficient bus service. Also, what facilities are they? Actually, terribly little. To say there's a village shop is actually probably a bit of an exaggeration. And if you wanted to actually join in the facilities and the environment, there is actually obviously the church, which is the very centre of the organisation, and one which we would obviously encourage. But I have to say, as a whole, I feel wholly uncomfortable with this application. I urge you to reject it. I think it needs much more consideration. I am not at all convinced by the way we've given reassurances, and I frankly think that this is a matter that should be much further investigated, because what I fear is we'll have more mission creep and more residential occupancy and fewer holiday residents. So that's my pitch to you. I hope it persuades you. Don't see too many nods, but okay, I live in hope. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Any comments from the committee, Councillor Warren? No? Thank you. You may return to your seat. Can I just remind the committee, we are only looking to seek to regularise the situation on the site and nothing else, okay? Anybody wish to start general conversation? Oliver.
Yes, thank you to everyone who's come to speak here today, and because it does appear from the history of this site that the way in which it's developed has been rather problematic and challenging to some degree. It's also unfortunate, in my view, that this site is for practical purposes a car-dependent site. There will be an impact of adding an extra 15 units on the site, but I guess in my view the harm caused by this is outweighed by the benefits of having a much clearer situation in terms of planning regulations and conditions, and also by the provision of a small number of additional homes in the district in a situation where the council does not at present have a 5-year housing land supply. So I think I will be supporting the recommendation of the officers in this one.
Anybody else wish to speak? Joe first, then Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, I concur with Councillor Laming that there are concerns over this site, and I've got grave concerns about the energy performance of the static homes. I think Councillor Bullman is right, they are suboptimal. There's a lot of elderly people living there, and I know these homes get very, very cold and that they're heated by LPG. There is hardly any community facilities on site, and as we've heard, the bus stop is about half a mile away, and for elderly people, I know the site reasonably well, so walking down that long drive, a very long drive, and with no lighting, I can imagine if the bus comes at 5 o'clock, you'll be in absolute darkness. So I am really worried about this, and I don't feel I can support this application in its present form. But thank you, Chair.
Can I reiterate again, we are not looking at this like that. We are looking just at the regularisation of the units. Yeah, that's all we need to discuss today. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This site isn't a sustainable site, and if we are considering regularising it for residential use, then that surely should be something we should have been considering for the original residence sites on, when the other caravans were given resident status. However, for me it makes perfect sense that you draw a line under what has gone in the past. It's what's happened is happened. It's not an ideal situation. It's I feel very very sad for the residents that live there that don't have very many facilities. But you know, this is an opportunity to gain more council tax. This is an opportunity to draw a line under a bad situation, and you know, manage it going forward. And I think that's as much as we can do. I think that's really what this planning application is trying to do, really. So for that reason, I'll be supporting it.
Are you happy to go to the vote, or do you need any more comments? Peter, yeah.
Just an observation, really. I think it's unfortunate that the officers have been put in the position they were by the previous decision by the inspector. I have sympathy for Glenn Beaumont, and I understand his position in recommending it. It's not ideal, far from it, but I think this is a step that we can take to go forward, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Okay, recommendation is to approve with conditions subject to matters relating to nutrient neutrality and GIRAMs being satisfactorily resolved. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? One. Thank you. All those connected with this application, if you wish to leave, you may do. Thank you. Thank you. Right, can we move on, please? Next application is Buxton. That is for development up to 40, outline planning for up to 40 residential dwellings. And again, Glenn will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair said, this is an outline application for development up to 40 dwellings and other associated works on land to the east of Aylsham Road in Buxton. Application is before you because the recommendation is contrary to the provisions of the development plan, and we'll see a slide explaining that a bit further later. In terms of updates, you can see on the update sheet that there is an additional planning condition proposed to secure the footpath link to the Buell Valley Railway car park. And reading a report this morning, I spotted a bit of a schoolgirl error, which I feel like I need to draw to your attention, which is at paragraph 5.39, where I refer to a footpath link to the rear of the primary school. That is a load of tosh, and so my apologies for my drafting error, and please disregard that. It doesn't make any difference to the assessment of the application, but yeah, that's my mistake, and I apologise. So the key considerations, as ever, are set out in section 5.1 of the report. They include, but they're not limited to, whether the principle of development is acceptable, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on residential amenity, and highway safety. And as I did with the last application, I'll give you a bit of context for the site, and then we'll pick up on the various issues as they arise. So here we see Buxton in all of its glory. The site is indicated by the yellow disc, sort of in the north central part of the slide. Aylsham Road to the west, which ultimately takes you up to the A140 between the two roundabouts on the Aylsham bypass. Mill Street, which takes you through to Lammas, and then Bardisfields, former RAF Coltishall Road, which takes you down to the recruiting sergeant roundabout at Horsted, and then Crown Road, Norwich Road, which takes you through Frettenham, Spixworth, and onto Oldcastle and Norwich. Buell Valley Railway, just sort of snaking its way through the northeast part of the village, runs from, as I'm sure most of you know, from Wroxham through to Aylsham. Probably also useful to point out a few of the services to set out the connectivity of the site to a range of local services. So if we go in an anti-clockwise direction, we've got the fish and chip shop, which I'm sure is a very important amenity, but equally next to that is the post office and the convenience shop for residents to use. There's a bus stop just opposite that, which Sanders, I think it's the number 54 that runs through there, and that goes all the way through the villages and down to Oldcastle in the city. We've got Ballet Park, which I missed, which is a sports pitches and a skate park with a scout hut just to the north of that. And then as we scope round to about 4 o'clock, we've got Buxton Recreation Ground, again sports pitches and the village hall, and there's a play area just there. Church on the opposite side of the road, and Buxton Primary School just behind the church. So the site is pretty well connected to the services, amenities and facilities within the village, most of them being within about 500-metre walk of the site itself. So if we look at in closer quarters, the application site, again denoted by the yellow disc, just gives it a sense of how it sits in relation to neighbouring developments. And then as we start thinking about the principle of development, so here we have on the left-hand side, we have the GNLP allocation, BBX1, for up to 40 dwellings on a site of 1.68 hectares. Probably a good reference point here is just this line here. So if we just continue the line, northern edge of the allocation, and you can just see the OS marking for the property boundary here, that same line is just there on the application site. So the application site is about 10 metres wider than the allocation at the front, and then a bit wider at the back where it accommodates the drainage lagoon, which we'll see on the master plan shortly. To my mind, and as I set out in the report, although the site is a bit larger, it helps sort of free the site up a little bit, provides a better opportunity for a slightly looser form of development and landscaping, and it helps it sit a bit more comfortably on that edge of village location. Noting that the GNLP requires a density of 25 dwellings per hectare outside of Norwich city centre, but there's also some flexibility in that allows you to give some form and character considerations to what's around the area as well. So this looser 18.4 dwellings per hectare figure feels about right, especially when you look at what's around it. Some older properties with very long gardens and some slightly more modern properties, perhaps 1990s, which may be a bit more in line with modern standards for properties. Also, a useful point that although the site is contrary to the provisions of the development plan by being larger than the allocated site, as we've already spoken about, we don't have a 5-year land supply. So as before, significant and demonstrable harms balance that against the benefits of the proposal. So you have to be convinced that if you want to refuse this, you've got good grounds on which to do so. So let's look at the master plan. So here we have access is included as part of the application, which is in the southwest corner. And that will eventually project to the rear of the site on this indicative plan with spurs leading to residential properties. So the purpose of this plan is to demonstrate that the site can accommodate up to 40 dwellings fairly comfortably. We've got a range of property sizes. Probably just worth noting that there's, again, without wishing to overstate the point, this is an indicative plan, but these are bungalows in that far corner. There's perimeter walk being shown around the site, around the drainage lagoon, out onto the Bure Valley Railway car park, or just next to the car park. And then a fairly loose form of development, especially on the edge, and opportunities for some landscaping to be provided as well. And that's probably a bit more helpful to you because you're seeing that in slightly a closer up view rather than from a distance. And again, in terms of what I said about densities and layouts relative to neighbouring land, there's no particular grain or pattern that the site needs to follow in terms of its layout. And an indicative soft landscaping plan has been provided, and again quite useful just in terms of the thought that's been given to this by the applicant. Some landscaping along the fringes of the site, some planting also along the fringes of the site to help soften the development, but also within the site itself. We'll see a picture of the oak tree about halfway along that southern boundary, perhaps best illustrated here, and you can see some open space is shown as being provided while also accommodating 40 dwellings. You probably noted when you read the report about the position of the gas pipeline to the north. That's shown in the yellowy, amber, orange line just in the northern part of the screen. It's about 100 metres away from the site, and following the submission of a risk assessment by the application, National Gas Transmission withdrew its holding objection to the application. So we're all square in that sense. Starting to get our boots on the ground now. So here we have the front of the site, looking from just outside the southwest corner. So this is the existing access that agricultural vehicles use to access the site. In order to accommodate a residential access, it's going to have to be a bit wider than that. So those first two trees you can see just to the left of the 50-mile-an-hour sign are going to need to be removed to accommodate that. And then also in the distance, in the report I spoke about that the site's not particularly visible or standouty as you're approaching it from Aylsham Road to the north. But you can just see where that kind of wall starts to develop a bit further up Aylsham Road. I've taken a walk along the verge a bit further up here. You can see that it's a bit gappy, but nevertheless you see it in the context of that residential development on Sewell Road and Aylsham Road to the south, which you can just see there. We live in a four-season country, and again this is a bit further up Norwich Road. So this is a Google image taken from August in a particular year. Shows the site being very well screened. So hopefully as a driver you're keeping your eyes on the road and you're not looking for the development, but if you're an eagle-eyed and keen-eyed passenger, you may well struggle to see the development through that vegetation. Again, showing that it can perhaps be absorbed into the surrounding landscape. And then as we look south along Aylsham Road, one can see the existing house types on the same side of the road as the application site, which is just off screen to the left. And you can see there's no footpath there, which is still the case now. This application proposes to put a formal footpath in. We'll see a slide of that later, going all the way down to the junction with Sewell Road to the south. And I've just taken a walk down the other way, and I'm just to the south of Cubit's Meadow. The site is beyond that evergreen hedge just there. And again, you'll see it in the context as you're travelling, whether you're travelling in or out of Buxton, you'll see the site within the context of existing residential development. I've stepped just inside the application site here, so here we are looking down the southern boundary. You can see that dip just off to the left of centre. This is where the infiltration lagoon is going to be, and that hedgerow denotes the boundary with the Bure Valley Railway and the footpath, and the land sort of undulates slightly beyond that. And then just taking a couple more steps in, angling back, see that oak tree, dead centre, very substantial. We want to keep that. And the open space is not proposed for removal, and indicatively open space, a section of open space was shown as being around that. And then I'm now standing in the picnic area just next to the Bure Valley Railway car park, probably where the footpath link is likely to be provided. I think it's a good time, given that we can see those properties on the left-hand side, to think about residential amenity. It's an outline application. We don't have details of elevations or floor plans, so we don't quite know what we're going to be hit with. Nevertheless, as I set out in the report, with careful room planning and layout and consideration to the wider layout of the site, I'm confident that a layout can be achieved that avoids significant adverse impacts on the living conditions of those properties, both in respect of the massing of the dwellings and potential overlooking. And then these next couple of slides are just showing how the site sits in relation to that edge of village location. So here we are at the top end of the picnic area at the Bure Valley Railway car park looking back. And then I've crossed the railway, I've walked up the public footpath, and I'm standing almost at the crest of that slope, looking back down. The site is sort of in this area here. And again, whether you're standing in the Bure Valley Railway car park or from this vantage point, you will see the development in the context of what's around it to the south, and that is existing residential development. I then walked up the Bure Valley Railway, and that amplifies the point I've just made. Look at what's in the background. I'm standing opposite the platform for the Buxton station, and again, properties to the left, dwellings will be a continuation of that. And then in terms of highway improvements, we've got the access into the site just here, and then that 1.8 metre wide footpath is going to replace the informal arrangement that is along those terraced houses along Aylsham Road, to provide something a bit more appropriate to residents of existing and the proposed properties to access the wider footpath network. And then you can also see, it's not labelled, but we've got Ballet Park on the opposite side of the road, tactile crossing point across the road, and then the provision of a footpath for people to access Ballet Park. And again, here's just a repeat of a duplicate of a slide that we've already seen, showing where that footpath is going to be on the eastern side of the road. And then further round, as you get round towards the village hall and the post office, some minor footpath improvements to widen it, new crossing point as well just here, and that will extend all the way up to this junction here, which as we start getting closer to Buxton Primary School. And all of these have been accepted by the Highway Authority and are considered to be acceptable to make the development, necessary to make the development acceptable, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I should have just sort of maybe swapped those slides around, but here's the current situation, and here's what's being proposed. Oops. So here we are at the final slide. Key issues: principle of development, impact on the character and appearance of the area, residential amenity, highway safety, connectivity of the site, and impact on habitat sites and nutrient neutrality. So to my mind, the application is within the spirit of the GNLP allocation, if not entirely in accordance with it, but nevertheless we have to consider it in the context of us not having a 5-year land supply. I'm not persuaded that there are any significant and demonstrable harms arising that would outweigh the benefits arising from this development. And consequently, Chair, my recommendation is to approve the application subject to various matters being resolved.
Thank you, Glenn. Any clarification from anybody? Joe and then Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Glenn. It looks like a really great site, and I'm very pleased to see that there is a link to the Bure Valley Railway and Path, which is part of our key infrastructure. So just a few very small questions. Is the 30-mile-an-hour limit being moved to the other side of the entrance for the site? So that's one thing. And the other thing I was concerned about is the Anglian Water, Aylsham water recycling plant doesn't seem to have the capacity at the moment, and I just wondered how officers were going to deal with that, because obviously it'd be lovely to get, you know, something like this built out really quickly. It's got great numbers of affordable homes, but is Anglian Water going to hold this site up? Thank you, Chair.
Forgive me, Councillor Coppleton, I should have mentioned about the repositioning of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. That's being repositioned 150 metres further north of the site. And it's going to be of no surprise to you that matters relating to Anglian Water, I'm going to pass the ball to Ben to answer that.
And that's fine. I think it's just worth looking at what the condition has been requested for by Anglian Water. So it specifically says, prior to the occupation of the development, written confirmation from Anglian Water must be submitted confirming that there is sufficient headroom at the water recycling centre to accommodate the foul flows from the development. If we then look at what precedes it, they're saying they have got upgrades planned at the wastewater treatment plant at Aylsham between 2025 to 2030. We're not quite there yet, but very soon I'm looking to take the same response or same action that I've been doing with the schemes going to Whitlingham, which is in effect to say, well, that condition is flawed, because it is flawed. We're asking the developer to be completely at the behest of Anglian Water, and they're saying they can do it between 25 to 30, but that wouldn't pass the tests of a condition. So I'm not willing to put that on at the moment. I'm still in discussions with them to work it through. But also, I think it's worth picking up the point that this was an allocation in the GNLP. Anglian Water were consulted all throughout that process as well. So, as I said, I'm not quite there yet, which is why the recommendation is to defer finalising that matter with Anglian Water. But I would expect that I'll be at a point very soon where I'm saying we're not looking to impose that condition, if that's helpful and useful.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. Slide 4, on your slide, there's a blue line. I may have missed what that blue line represents there. Can you just explain to me again what that is?
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, and also, can you confirm the number of affordable housing that is going to be stipulated for this site? Okay, I was asking a question. And also, can you, you've put a road crossing on the Aylsham Road, but it is from a housing estate to a park. There's a lot of children going to be crossing that, potentially by themselves. Should that not be a formal zebra crossing of some sort? So they're my 3 questions.
Okay, starting with the one on the screen, the red line is the application site, so that is what the subject of the application is.
Right.
That's the red line. So the blue line is additional land under the control of the applicant, but is not part of the application.
Okay.
Affordable housing, we will be seeking to secure through the Section 106 agreement at 33%, bearing in mind that the application is for up to 40 dwellings, so it's not a fixed number at the moment. If 39 dwellings comes, 33% of 39 is different to 33.
Okay.
Point, but it will be 33%.
33, okay.
And then as far as the crossing is concerned, we consulted the Highway Authority on that. If they felt that it was necessary to make the development acceptable, they would have asked for it. There's been discussions with Highway Authority throughout the application. Applicants had pre-apps with them as well. At no point did they request that. And so we can't, bluntly, because we think it might be a good idea, we can't necessarily ask for it. So not necessary to make the development acceptable is the ultimate point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to speakers. Got John Howe. I'd like to come to the front, Mr. Howe. You press the right hand button. You have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you very much for your words on this application. Just bear with me if I stumble over mine. I'm very nervous at this point, but I'll do the best I can. Having lived in Buxton for nearly 26 years, I know there have been at least 3 applications to build at this site. And despite trying to find the reasons for these previous denials, I'm sure some of them may still be relevant today. At the last application, although denied at Elsham Road, an alternative site at Mead Close was granted planning, suggesting to me that other sites are preferable. Even so, this site was never sold, and therefore you could say that even though it was preferable, it was still not attractive enough to sell. So maybe focus should be on ongoing sites, like the hundreds of homes being built around Aylsham, rather than the well-loved smaller community of Buxton. If this proposal goes ahead, it would mean at least 40 plus vehicles would require access to Aylsham Road at a position opposite to an entrance, where a property that was, as I understood, given planning on the proviso, there would be no farm and possibly even personal traffic using that entrance. To allow an estate of houses access at the same point of this road does not make sense. The Aylsham Road is not a safe highway. There have been several incidents along its length from Buxton to Aylsham, the last one fatal. Also, if it takes 18 to 24 months, that's just my guess, I don't know, to build these houses, the heavy truck traffic would not only be extremely dangerous, it would damage the road edges significantly, as the quarry trucks have on the much better and wider road from Buxton to Coltishall. As a small village, I feel the character of Buxton will be changed significantly, and worse, could be the start of further building on the same field. I understand that farmers need to do what they can to increase revenue, but I feel this would just be the first step in filling in the rest of the field. On a more personal level, this development, as it has been presented, would seriously impinge on the privacy of those living on the edge of the site. Also, during the winter, for about 3 months, there is no direct sunlight at the rear of our properties. I say our because I live on a property facing the field. By building 2-storey houses directly behind us, and I'll caveat that I didn't realise that the ones directly behind my house are bungalows, and I didn't realise this is provisional, so I presume that can all be changed. And I think a barrier between our properties and the start of the housing estate, which is kind of, if the blue line designates where the developer's own property, that could all be used to move the whole estate just that bit further away, giving us a barrier to the houses. For about 3 months we get no direct sunlight as we face north, and by building other houses directly behind us would cut out the ambient light too, and not just in the winter. It would cut that out in the summer, which is quite important. For these reasons, I urge the Planning Authority to uphold their previous wise decision on this development, on the development of this site, and reject this application. That's it. Yeah, beg your pardon.
Thank you. Any clarification from Ross?
I just wondered if I could ask the planning officers a point that's been raised by the speaker about the boundary between the existing properties and the new properties. I understand that would probably come forward as part of the Reserve Matters application, but could something be borne in mind in terms of giving some indication of what kind of boundary we might like to see, just to protect the privacy of the people who already live there?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right to begin with in saying that this would be a reserve matters because it would be part of the landscaping, and clearly we'll bear the privacy of not only existing properties in mind, but also proposed properties because it cuts both ways. So certainly, as with any application of this type, that's something that we will certainly have in mind.
I've got one question. Gentleman brought up about previous planning applications. On the report it says none.
Yeah, and I stand by that. I mean, certainly when we get our planning applications, by way of boring explanation, we draw a polygon around the site on our system, and that draws in every application that's been submitted on that site. And this did not reveal any applications on that site.
May I speak on that? There's been two since I've been living there. And I understood there was another one prior to me moving in. I moved in the year 2000.
Maybe we need to get that clarified.
Yeah, and I'll just come in. I'm really confident in our system.
Maybe that's why I couldn't find the information then, because they're not on your system. But I can assure you, I've lived there for 26 years, and there have been two previous applications. And as I say, one of them was at the same time as at Mead Road. So I don't know what's going on there, but it seems like it's your system rather than.
I'm really confident in our system, but also I think it's really important to consider what's in front of us as well today, which is an application that's allocated in the GNLP, regardless of any applications that may or may not have come before.
Mr. Howe, you may return to your seat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to turn the microphone off?
Got, want to call Andy Moffat? Sorry for the long walk. Okay, Mr. Moffat, you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. Also, thank you to the officers who have been positive throughout both the pre-application and the application stages. As we've heard, land east of Elsham Road, Buxton, is an allocated site for approximately 40 homes, and this application is for up to 40 homes on that site, plus, as you've heard, about half a hectare of land to the north. As the committee report recognises, and you've heard again this morning, all of the dwellings would be within the allocated site, and that additional land is only been included to accommodate the drainage lagoon that is likely to be required, and importantly, to assist in providing the layout with a looser form, softer edge, and more sensitive transition from the countryside to the village streets that policy BUX 6, the neighbourhood plan, seeks. Indeed, the inclusion of this additional land was born out of positive engagement and collaboration with the case officer and urban design officer at the pre-application stage. We welcome the confirmation in the report that with the additional information provided in relation to new and widened footways and improved crossing points, which you've heard about from the case officer, which will benefit existing and new residents, the local highway authority has confirmed that all of its comments have been satisfactorily addressed. We also welcome the case officer's conclusion that it is evident the site can accommodate up to 40 dwellings without significant detrimental effects on the residential amenity of the occupiers of existing and proposed properties, and that there are no remaining objections from statutory consultees. The illustrative layout which you've been shown demonstrates how the development could take place, but again, as you've heard, detailed matters, including impacts on the occupiers of adjacent properties, will be considered further and determined at the reserve matter stage. The officer report in front of you also covers all the specific points made by the Parish Council. Section 106 and obligations that have been agreed with the applicant and set out in your report will also ensure that the details of the development will indeed all be acceptable at the reserve matter stage. Again, as you've heard today, it is the case that planning permission should be granted in this instance unless the adverse effects of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Importantly though, and more positively, the report before you actually concludes that the economic, social and environmental benefits of the development decisively outweigh the harms. We therefore respectfully ask you to resolve to grant planning permission in accordance with the recommendation before you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moffat. Any questions or comments for the speaker? No? Thank you. You may return to your seat. Personally, I think this is a very good application. It's within its allocation in the Greater Norwich Local Plan, and I'm pleased to see that affordable housing is considered to the maximum amount. Do you wish to have any discussion about this, or straight to?
Yeah, I want to concur with what you've said, Chair. I think it's a great scheme. It will benefit the local economy, certainly. I'm really pleased to see all the pavement improvements as well, the changing of the 30-mile-an-hour zone, the link to the Bure Valley Path, and also 33% affordable homes. So I would like to propose that we approve this application, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one for me, just to reiterate really, this is local homes for local people. This allows, potentially with affordable homes, allows local people to stay in the villages they were born in, raised up in. Also, this is great for the community because this is more people using the local post office, more people using the local shop. This is, you know, improving the sustainability of the village. So it can only be a good thing. It's you know, it's not going to it fits in very well with the surrounding neighbourhood, so I'm, you know, very happy to approve it.
Okay, well, Stuart.
Just quickly, I concur with everything that's been said. Just one thing on the affordable homes, I presume that'll be covered at the reserve matters stage, will be 10-year local lettings policy, etc.
Yeah, I think we offset that out in the consultation response from the Housing Enabling Officer. But yeah, a percentage will be provided for local residents and people with. It is 33%. Yeah. It's not set out in her comments, but we do require a percentage of that, which off the top of my head is 33% of the rented units. But we can sort that out at Section 106 stage.
Yeah, happy with that.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, we go to recommendation to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning to approve subject to matters relating to Anglian water being satisfactorily resolved and matters relating to nutrient neutrality being satisfactorily resolved and subject to planning conditions and satisfactory completion of the Section 106 agreement. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Howard, Mr. Moffat, you may leave if you wish to, or you can. We're very welcome to stay. Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break, please.